All right, guys, I'm going to keep this intro very short just because I've already told you all about Michael, just because the majority of y'all already know. I just want to thank him for coming on and helping me out here because he knows significantly more about fantasy baseball than I do. So, as always, whenever he comes on, it's a treat for all of us. And if you want to find any more of his stuff, just go to the description of the video. It's all going to be there. I mean, he does like 3 or 4 different podcasts. I'm not going to dive into them right now. And also, a quick shout out to everybody in the flock, as this channel is growing a lot faster than I thought it would. We are closing in on 100 subscribers right now. So thank you. Thank you for dropping likes. Thank you for asking your questions in the comment section below. And most importantly, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Now, yeah, that's all I got. Let's get into it. And I love what Michael has to say in this video. All right, Michael, I was not planning on talking about this, but you brought it up, and I think it's a fantastic idea. I think this could help a ton of people that are just now getting into fantasy baseball specifically. But let's dive a little bit deeper. I've said on the basic strategy videos that I've made that I can only really go to the basics. I can really only cover some simple concepts. But I was waiting until I got someone like yourself who actually knew what they were doing to be able to come on and give us a little bit more complex ideas, to give us a little bit more of their complex strategy on how we can have a higher expected value through our team construction in a specific format. So let's go through, and for this video, let's talk about roto leagues. Let's not focus too much in on head-to-head. Let's not focus on points. Let's just go over these traditional roto leagues, and let me toss you the reins. You take this wherever you want because it's pretty much going to be 100% you.
Oh, Mason, you're so funny. What a modest man you always are. I have played fantasy baseball for 20 years, so it's fair to say I have experience. And rotisserie is a different game than a head-to-head points, whatever, best ball. There's so many different ways to play this game. But in roto, I believe it's the truest, most genuine, and fairly representative outcome of the team you draft or the players you pick up, because it counts all your stats. It's that simple. If we're talking 5x5 roto, which is your standard categories, home runs, RBIs, steals, batting average, runs scored, and then wins, saves, whip, ERA, and strikeouts. That's it. Those are the 10 categories you have to fill. And if you're not playing with an overall component, which most people aren't, you're just playing in your standalone league and you're trying to win it, you can punt some categories. This is one way you can go. You can punt saves, forget about relievers, and just try to rack up elite offensive stats and get starting pitching that will build up your overall Ks and wins, and hopefully get some guys that can even out those ratios. But if you are looking to improve your ratios, that's where relievers can be very beneficial. Guys like Liam Hendricks and Josh Hader are two of the best with elite ratios for ERA and whip. That's one way to do it. You could also consider punting steals. And in case you don't know, if you've never played fantasy baseball before, then steals and saves are the most scarce categories to fill. And they're always being, everybody's getting after one another, trying to figure out who can get the most out of both of those. That's why Trey Turner is a first-round pick in Roto, because of those steals he can provide. That's another reason Alberto Mondesi keeps rising up the boards, because if he steals 50 plus bags, it's a huge benefit. But at the same time, he can hurt your average. So you got to think about these things. Remember, when you take a player, rarely is there a guy like Fernando Tatis who can just give you all 5 categories and just fill it out nicely. He is a unicorn, as Bill Simmons would like to say. He's a unique player. They don't exist very often, even in fantasy land. So remember that for every player you choose, there might be a negative to one of your categories, and that's where draft building comes into play. You might have a concept for how you're going to build your roster, but once the draft gets started, things can change very quickly. Guys can go off the board that you expected to be there, and suddenly you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? I got to fill this hole. So remember, adjust accordingly, have a plan, but be ready to make, zigzag and change directions very quickly. And also know where the types of players are that are deeper in the draft that can fill some gaps. There are guys down in the 200s and 300s who can give you stolen bases. Guys like Scott Kingery or Garrett Hampson are players that can help you with steals. They might not They might not be elite at everything, but if you got guys that are covering your batting average early on, then you can have those guys fill in.
All right. Well, what do you think about this, Michael? Because I heard you reference punting, and I cover fantasy basketball a lot. And a big thing in fantasy basketball is going through in those category leagues and possibly punting something like turnovers or punting free throw percentage. And my piece of advice for that, and I think that it would probably carry over for fantasy baseball at the same time, is to never go into a draft with a specific strategy of going, in this draft, what I'm going to accomplish is I'm going to punt saves, I'm going to punt steals. What I try to advise people to do, and let me know if you think that this carries over for fantasy baseball, is I like to tell people to go in and go, I'm going to draft the best players available with my first 2, 3, 4 picks. Maybe I come away with someone that isn't going to steal a lot of bags. Maybe my first pick, I find some value. I take a Mike Trout. And then my second pick, we go around. I also select someone that is going to put me a little bit behind the 8 ball when it comes to steals. And then that is when you make the decision point. You go, you know what? I've already loaded up on 2 guys that are going to be studs across every other category. Might as well not try to bother catching up here later on in the draft. Might as well just go full on punt mode. But I think that's the number one thing that you have to try to balance is whenever you go in, and when do you pivot over from having that balanced team that's going to give you every single category to finally determining, you know what, okay, it's time to throw in the towel here, or it's time to maybe try to put a Band-Aid on somewhere else. Like, how do you strike that balance of knowing when to punt or maybe to go after a category that you are a little bit low on based on your early rounds?
Certainly a great question, Mason. No doubt about it. That's why he's here, folks. He asks the tough questions. And I got to tell you, Mason, don't panic early on. Example, over the weekend, drafted Freddie Freeman as our first pick. Freddie Freeman is very elite in everything but steals, as you were saying. So it was a Roto league, and we calmly thought about it. And we said, all right, well, it's still early enough. Let's not panic. We stayed the course. We took Walker Buehler. We're at the turn. So we had Freeman and Buehler, and then we just kept building from there. But we talked about, because this was a co-managed situation too, which is weird, unusual. I had never done it before. It was a first time experience for me, but the lesson still applies because it's Roto building. We calmly said, all right, we'll look for some steals down the road here, but we're not going to jump the gun. We took Starling Marte a couple picks later because we needed an outfielder anyways, and he can give us 25 steals. We feel confident in that, so that helps us. But he also doesn't hurt you in batting average. He's a really good player for like a floor that you could trust in almost all the categories, really. He's kind of underrated as a 5-cat guy. Maybe not a super elite batting average, but still a decent like 280, 285, 290 if things go right. So that's how I look at it. Don't panic. Take your time. Once you get to like pick 125 or later, and you've seen the first 8 or 9 or 10 picks, depending how big your league is, you start to say, hey, all right, party's over on steals, or, we're just not going to be able to take advantage of saves. So let's just forget about relievers and just go all in on everything else. And that's how it can go.
All right. Well, I hope this conversation helped. I really don't know if there's anything else to talk about here outside of, actually, no, this is a good thing. So whenever you are in a Roto league and you are trying to get that balance, how would you recommend attacking the first 3 or 4 rounds? Maybe it's just best player available. You don't care. This is a very simple question. Or maybe after your first 4 picks, is there a certain roster construction do you like to see? Do you like to see, okay, I have 3 hitters, I have 1 pitcher, I have 2 pitchers, I have 2 hitters? Is there a balance between that, or is it as simple as best players available to me at a given selection?
You can do that. You can take the best, most talented player still there, go for it. But there's also a lot of consternation around this debate, and it's often argued about between analysts saying, hey, take pocket aces. Pocket aces is a term that's become pretty popular. Your first 2 picks, you take a Cole and you take Bieber if you could, or you take Cole and a Giolito or a Bauer and DeGrom as your first 2 picks. And you say, all right, we are locked in with these 2 aces. If you believe that innings pitched are going to have massive discrepancies among the best of the best and the so-called also rans, then you need to do that. But if you believe that We're going to have 6-man rotations galore all season long. And we're going to have, I don't even know what you call them. These guys that'll just fill innings off taxi squads, and COVID can happen and cancel games, and players got to jump in to fill innings. And who could really say where innings pitch will lay out, if there's going to be the elites of the elites and then a big drop off? So if you believe that, then you should do a pocket aces strategy. If not, then take the best players available and build from there. That's what I like to do. First couple rounds, I don't need to necessarily go, hey, I got to have a hitter and a pitcher my first 2 picks. Don't ever pigeonhole yourself like that. Take the most talented guys right off the bat, because talent wins the day and is going to give you big time stats. And you can worry about filling other stuff later if you feel like there's gaps. It's a long way to go on every draft. It takes time, and there's always players. There's always players that can fill spots where you feel you are weak.